This week on Worldview, as Bangladesh's interim government, led by Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus, completes 100 days in office since the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, what lies ahead for the country and what does it mean for India? We sat down for an exclusive interview with Mr. Yunus to discuss ties, his plans for elections, concerns about the rise of radicalism and the safety of minorities, as well as the case against Ms. Hasina. Hello and welcome to Worldview at the Hindu with me, Suhasini Heather. Now, with 100 days in office, Bangladesh's interim government that was formed after protesting mobs forced former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to flee the country and come to India. It says it has done a few things. One, it has brought law and order under control, started a reforms process for a number of institutions, including electoral reforms. It has managed $1.5 billion in debt repayments, which has improved its image of economic credibility and begun a process of accountability against Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the previous government for both what it calls corruption and criminality in ordering the crackdown on student protesters earlier this year, with about 1,500 believed to have been killed and nearly 20,000 injured. In Dhaka this week, I sat down with Chief Advisor Muhammad Yunus for an interview, asking him what he thinks he has achieved in 100 days. Joining me today is a very special guest, the Chief Advisor to the interim government here in Bangladesh, Professor Muhammad Yunus. And you finished 100 days as the Chief Advisor. Give me a sense of how you would grade your own report card on two major issues. One is law and order, and the other is the economy, the kind of inflation and other problems people have.
Well, on law and order, we are still moving. It's improving, but I won't say we'll get to A yet, but soon we'll get to A. On the issue of economic, what's that word?
The economic issues of inflation. People's...
Yeah, there I would say it's A plus, because we inherited a shattered economy. Not only economy was shattered, all our institutions were shattered. All financial institutions were shattered. Banking system nearly collapsed. It's a crazy banking system. The repayment rate is way down. Bad loans, 60%, crazy numbers, crazy percentages. Large number of banks don't know how to deal with each other, how to deal with the customers and so on. So we had a almost dysfunctional financial system. So started from there, we built it up, making banking system function again. It's not perfect yet, but they're functioning and moving forward.
Of course, for India, what's important is where do bilateral ties go from there? So to start with, here's what he said about how he sees ties with India.
We are imagining some relationship like European Union. So that's the direction we want to go. These are good signs, what you said is a good sign, but far away from what we want to achieve. So that's the direction we like to move, to be union of very close ties.
If you were to meet Prime Minister Modi soon, what would be at the top of your
This is what I'll tell him.
Connectivity.
We are born to be together. We are twins.
Now, despite those positive statements about twinning, India and Bangladesh have had tensions on a number of issues since Mr. Yunus took over. To begin with, the status of Sheikh Hasina herself. Of course, this is not the first time Sheikh Hasina has sought refuge in India. After her father's assassination in 1975, she lived here for several years. The second big issue between the two countries has been the attacks on Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. And this is something raised by the Ministry of External Affairs as well. The third was the future of Indian projects in Bangladesh, including the Adani Power Project. And remember, High Court in Bangladesh has now ordered a high-level panel and inquiry into whether that deal was done at a disadvantage to Bangladesh in terms of the power pricing. And fourth, the continuing allegations over the release of water by India. that has been too little or too much, leading to drought sometimes and also floods, according to the Bangladesh government. And this has again spiraled tensions between the two in the past few months. So let's just take a look at those two issues, the first two issues, which have been really the source of a lot of back and forth. The first is the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. She's of course seen as very close to India and a strong supporter of India-Bangladesh ties. And after 16 years in power, that was a blow for India. For Bangladesh, her fleeing to India has now become proof that she's being backed by New Delhi, although the Ministry of External Affairs has insisted that this is temporary. Here's what Mr. Yunus said was really the problem there. Listen in.
Living in India for the time being is not a problem. Talking to Bangladesh is the problem. She's not only living in India, but she's talking to Bangladeshi people with the televisions, with their phones and so on.
In what way?
On the phone.
But she speaks to people. She's not broadcasting.
It's a political. These are all.
So continuing political activities.
These are political activities. Interfering with the internal matters of another country.
And yet your government has not actually asked for an extradition. There's an extradition treaty.
Yes, I think there is a legal steps which we have not come to that stage yet.
I wanted to ask you if, and this is a hypothetical, if India refuses to accept the extradition treaty or does not allow
you mean violate the treaty?
There are clauses in the treaty that allow India, in its own interest or for political reasons, if they feel someone is being politically
if there's
persecuted.
a clause, of course, India can keep, but that will not make a very happy relationship between us.
Then.
Our interim government is a very short-lived government, so it's not something that will settle everything between Bangladesh and India. So this will not be forgiven by any government that comes after us.
Next, it is that Mr. Yunus's regime stands accused of not having done enough to protect minorities, seen as supporters of Ms. Hasina and the Awami League, who have been targeted in August and September and continue to feel afraid as there are some attacks still going on. Here's what the Ministry of External Affairs actually said last week, voicing its concerns.
We yet again urge the government of Bangladesh to take strong measures to ensure the safety of Hindus and to take action against extremist elements.
Now, of course, the Bangladesh government insists that these are Bangladeshi citizens and that they are doing what they can. Now, I did speak to some people who knew a little more, according to this one petition I have here by the Bangladesh Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Council. They gave figures. In fact, they offered this petition to Mr. Yunus, who promised to look into them. He's met with these groups a few times. But according to their figures, at least 9 people have been killed and more than 2,000 incidents of violence against minorities have been recorded. This is mainly against a 13 million strong Hindu community that makes up about 8% of the population. Remember, they do say that the numbers are probably far more, but people are too afraid to come up and register those cases with the police, many accusing the police themselves of doing nothing to protect them. I met that group. I also went to the Dhakeshwari temple in Dhaka and spoke to some of the people there and then posed some of their concerns to Mr. Yunus.
When I had the first phone call with Prime Minister Modi, that's precisely what I told him. Because he said that the minorities are being treated badly in Bangladesh and so on. I told him very clearly, that's a propaganda. Don't go for the propaganda. Why don't you send your reporters? Go see case by case. It's open country. Nothing is hidden here. So report on each specific case and tell what it is. And lots of reporters came here. Nobody said there's a killing going on and so many people got killed. They had some report about some tensions and so on and so forth, but not in the way that's been built up for Prime Minister Modi or President Trump, not at that kind of level. That's a pure propaganda.
I have spoken to members of the minority community. They do feel scared. They do feel targeted. There are videos out on Facebook, on social media, talking about the fact that Bangladesh will be a Muslim country. We do hear about people in positions of power now talking about changing the constitution to take secularism out of it. There is a sense that what is coming to Bangladesh next, and through your own government, is a much more radical form of Islam than we have seen in Bangladesh in the last 16 years. Is there something that your government can do to reassure these communities?
Does this fit me? Every single member of the cabinet either is a human rights activist, all their life is a human rights activist, doesn't matter what and that's why they suffered, that's why they're in the cabinet, or environmental activist, or gender activist, or other activist. So these are all activist people. If you say the words that you said in front of them, they will be shouting at you. Go to the life of each one of the cabinet members.
So nobody in your cabinet would push for an Islamist agenda?
Look at the life stories of each one of them. These are very dedicated people, dedicated women. They are women activists. And you think they are the one who will be championing the kind of rule that you are expecting.
Mr. Yunus there clearly being categorical, saying it's exaggerated. That is certainly an issue that has to be dealt with very sensitively because, as I said, this involves citizens of Bangladesh. So why should India be worried and care about what happens next in Bangladesh, whether there'll be a continuation of the interim government, whether the army will take a stronger role, or whether there will be elections there? To begin with, Bangladesh is a very, very important neighbor. It is the longest land boundary that India has, more than China and more than with Pakistan as well. The second is the number of connectivity projects India has undertaken in Bangladesh, whether it's to build roads, trading ports, water channels, railway lines, energy, including the most recent one, which was for transnational Nepal-Bangladesh power supplies that come in via the Indian grid. So a very important project there. In fact, Bangladesh is an integral part of all India's strategies for the region, for regional connectivity. So whether it is India's Act East policy, the BIMSTEC grouping that has overtaken SAARC, as well as the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal connectivity corridor for motor vehicles and other things. The fourth reason is the terror threat. In 2009, Sheikh Hasina had ordered a crackdown on terror groups and handed over more than 20 wanted men to India. Since then, India has not had to worry as much about a terror threat from its eastern flank, but the worry that this could return if there isn't an India-friendly regime in place. And finally, it's Bangladesh's backing in South Asia and at the United Nations on multinational fora, multilateral fora of all kinds, regional groupings like SAARC, that India has received Sheikh Hasina and, of course, Bangladesh's support in the last few years. After the changes in government in the Maldives, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, the change in government in Bangladesh puts India in a much tougher position in the neighborhood. So what's Worldview's take? India-Bangladesh ties are just too important for them and for regional stability to be pinned on any one leader, any one government or regime. It is significant that New Delhi has moved to ensure continuity in trade, in energy, and other bilateral issues. Eventually, the issue of Prime Minister Hasina is an emotive one for both countries and therefore must be tackled with care, possibly left to a later discussion with the elected government in Bangladesh, which is due to follow the interim regime. So for some Worldview reading recommendations, and of course I gave you several in July when we last looked at the issue and what was going on there. To begin with, a book again, another recommendation for India's Near East by Avinash Paliwal. It's really a very up-to-date read. The second is Shadows at Noon, the South Asian 20th Century by Joya Chatterjee, a big fat volume, but it has very interesting insights on India-Bangladesh. A book that's just come out, I haven't read it yet, called 50 Years of Bangladesh. It's been edited by scholars, including Rana Jahan and Rahman Sobhan. Another book I've just received called The Tortuous Evolution of South Asian Regional Cooperation. So all of you interested in South Asia will find this book interesting. It's about Bangladesh's travails for sub-regional cooperation, and it's by former High Commissioner to India, Tariq Karim. He was also Bangladesh's ambassador to the United States. Then there's a book called Being Hindu in Bangladesh, The Untold Story by Deep Haldar and Abhishek Biswas, written last year, but certainly is very timely right now. And finally, the number of books I'd spoken about earlier as well, written by Professor Muhammad Yunus about ending global poverty. And then there's a biography of him called 22 Cents, Muhammad Yunus and the Village Bank by Paula Yu, that really talks about his very, very humble origins as well. We hope you enjoy reading them, and do join us again here on Worldview from the team. Thanks for watching.